Hello there. I've got a question with regards to the law of God. This is November the 15th, 2022. And the question is, can the law be divided? This is something that comes up in conversations that people have when it comes to the subject of the law. There are two ways that people usually try to divide up the law. The first way is between the moral law of God and the ceremonial law of God. That's one thing that people will do. What happens is that this usually happens within a Christian church, within a congregational setting, and what happens is that they realize that the ceremonial part of the Mosaic law just isn't going to work. It just isn't compatible with what we believe and with what we understand or with how we're going to try to live. For example, people are not going to set up a sacrificial system, and there is a lot in the law about the sacrificial system. So they don't want to do that, especially when they want to assert that Jesus is our sacrifice for sins. Then we definitely don't want to be sacrificing bulls, goats, pigeons, setting our pets on fire. We don't want to do that. So people will separate those laws out and say, well, there are these that just don't fit, they don't seem to apply. But the moral laws, with regards to how we relate to one another, well, they still work, they still apply. And so people will tend to create a division between those two, between the moral and the ceremonial. Now, you have to ask why. What is it that you're trying to accomplish by defining this kind of separation or this kind of division? And that just depends on who you ask. For example, you may have a particular church who believes that if they are observant, if they obey the moral laws of God, then God will bless them, which means that he will make them prosper, or he will give them things, or he will intervene in their lives in positive ways right now. And if he fails to do that, if he fails to find opportunities, then he will give you rewards in heaven when you go see him as compensation for where he fell short. He owes you, he will pay his debts, kind of thing. There are people who relate to God in this way. I don't think that he is going to cooperate as much as they would like, but this is what people would like to believe. And so they'll separate the law and say, well, we can't do these, but we can do these. And so since we can do these, well, then he'll owe us. He'll deliver. So you have to consider the purpose and the motive. What are people really trying to accomplish? There are people who will say, well, I just want to get others under control. They sin too much. They're doing things I don't like. And so I'm going to separate the law between the ceremonial, sacrificial, and the moral. And I'll say, these moral laws, God is going to hold against you. And so you had better stop being such an awful person, especially around me. Okay. And so you need to do this, or God is going to come in and he's going to intervene in your life, and he will hurt you. So do what I say, do what God says, or he will hurt you. And this, of course, is not the life under the new covenant, but there are a lot of people who would like to keep this system, this kind of system, alive. And so in order to do that, they will say, well, there is a division in the law, and this is a motive, this is a reason, all right? So you really have to consider, well, why? What are they really trying to accomplish by this? Okay, another division that was suggested by this person asking this question there in Canby, Oregon, is that they were talking with someone who said, well, we can divide the law between the first 10 commandments and call that the law of God, and then we have the other 603 commandments, which are the law of Moses. And I'm not sure what they're really trying to accomplish by saying that. Are they trying to say, well, I have this special intellectual, spiritual enlightenment that you don't have because I see that the first 10 are the law of God and the rest of them are the law of Moses because I've come up with this, because I say this, and you didn't realize that? Oh, obviously I am the spiritual authority in this conversation. And people will do that sometimes, and so to say that, well, we divide the law between the first 10 and the next 603, what does that mean? What are you really trying to accomplish by making that kind of a division? You have to really ask the person, what does that represent? What does that imply? How does that change how I relate to God? Look, the reason why God was only able to give the first 10 was pretty simple, pretty obvious in my opinion. He came to the mountain personally. He's got about 2.5 million people there that he set free from Egypt, and now he's going to speak to them directly. He's going to do what I like to call the God thing. Lightning, fire, smoke, thunder, earth shaking, that kind of stuff. That's the God thing. He's going to do the God thing, and he says, all right, here's the law. And he gives commandment number 1 and number 2. And I'm sure the people are down there saying, oh, yes, whatever you say, that's we'll do that. And here's number 3. Here's number 4. And then he gets to number 10. And what was it? Do not covet. And the people, they probably thought about that for a moment and thought, the first 9 we could do. But this 10th one, I don't think so. So what do? They say, no, this is all God's fault. We're afraid. We think we're going to die because, he's here. And this is just all really scary. And so, God, don't talk to us anymore. That 10th one, don't covet, that was excessive. That's just asking too much. So if you've got anything more to say to us about what you think we ought to do and what we ought not to do, you go talk with Moses way over there, outside the camp. Go somewhere else, effectively, out of town, go somewhere else. You want to talk to somebody, I think Moses will listen to you. Why don't you go talk to Moses, and whatever he says, we'll do whatever you tell him. We'll do it that way. That's what happened. It was just because they didn't don't covet. He couldn't even, he couldn't even get to a penalty for that one. What would happen if you violated that? Well, he couldn't even get that far. All right. So, a division occurred in that way. That was how the division happened. It wasn't so that we could have this new theological construct of the law of God and then the law of Moses, as if there really is going to be some kind of significant difference of some kind. Whether God said it to the people directly there on the mountain, or whether he said it through Moses, or whether we got it today because we can read it in the text that we have available. However it gets conveyed, it's still what God has to say. All right? So, no, I would not be concerned about the different ways that people try to divide the law. Instead, you have to ask the question, why? What are you trying to get at? What are you trying to accomplish? So that's what I can suggest when it comes to this kind of a question. It's just a general answer. If you've got some more specifics you'd like to ask that you think I might be able to help with, do send them to me by email to aaron@aaronbudgeon.net.